Hi there, welcome to Gen AI for Developers. My name is Derek Bingham. I am a developer advocate at AWS. So you may have heard the term Gen AI recently. It's been a term that's been well used, and in this show we're going to dive deep into it how it applies to developers. And to do that, I'm joined by Mike. Hi Mike.
Hey Derek, it's great to be in studio with you for once because I don't think we've actually done this before.
No, we haven't.
We've been on other ends of various calls online. But hi everybody, my name's Mike Chambers. I'm a developer advocate for AWS as well, and I work in the AI ML specialist team.
Awesome, well, welcome Mike. So my question and why we're doing this episode is what I've seen in the media and in technology recently was Gen AI. It's pretty much set with, you can use it as the everyman or the every person, or you can use it as a data scientist. I haven't seen much about the angle, my angle I'd call it, as the journeyman developer, someone who's been developing for a long time like myself. How can it benefit me and make my job easier?
I think it can, which is the good answer.
Yep.
I think there are a couple of different components here. On one hand, you've got tools that you can use that are generative AI powered that can make you a more efficient developer, potentially, maybe.
Hopefully.
So make you a bit faster and sort of help you out in that front. And then the other side of it is how can you integrate the power of generative AI and very much large language models, which is where a lot of the attention is at the moment. How can you incorporate that into your application stack as well? So both the use of and then the use in your development.
Interesting, interesting. So really you're putting it in two categories, use of and use in. So use of would be tooling and things like that, and use in would be more complicated scenarios that may be of interest to developers.
Yeah.
So let's split that up and maybe dive a little bit deeper into both of those. Maybe start with tooling. So I have had a play with models like ChatGPT. It's spat out some code for me. I've started to play around with that. Sometimes, with variable results.
Sure.
What would you think I should concentrate on?
Yeah, I've definitely done that myself as well. I'm not a developer. I script things and I do write code, but I know enough to say that I'm not a developer. I'll just put that out there right now. But yeah, so I've used tools like that. But what I think really helps here is my kind of development mode is I'll go with Stack Overflow on one side of my screen, or whatever tool it is, and then my IDE on the other side of the screen.
Sure.
And you are doing a lot of task switching. So what we're seeing now is the use more and more of these plugins inside of your IDE, which actually help you and be a pair programmer essentially in your code as you're writing.
That's interesting because I've had a little go with CodeWhisperer. Is that something that you'd recommend I have a more of a deeper dive into?
I think it's definitely worth having a play with.
Okay.
And I have it over here if you want to come and have a look.
Well, let's have a look at that then.
All right, cool. Yeah, so on my laptop here, I've got Visual Studio Code installed. And if you look down the bottom, and if you look down the bottom here, we've got CodeWhisperer. The plugin is already installed.
With a tick,
with a tick, yes, which means it's connected.
Excellent.
So it is connected to the CodeWhisperer endpoint, which means that whenever we're using it, it's going to be performing that AI for us with the model that's hosted inside of AWS.
Okay, so that's what the tick means. We're ready to go.
That's right.
Okay.
So like we've done before, and we've seen using prompts to be able to create code, we can do that actually inside of the IDE itself.
So a prompt is like an instruction. It's like, do this for me, please.
Yes, exactly. And so there's a couple of different ways you can do that with CodeWhisperer. One way would be to do it in the comments. So you could write a comment in your code which sort of talks to what you want to happen next, and CodeWhisperer could look at that and then write some code in response to that. And another way you can do it is to start writing code and then look to see if CodeWhisperer can essentially say, I see what you're doing here, here, let me write the rest of it.
So I've used it a little bit with C# because I do a lot of my coding in C#. I see here you've got a SQL file as well.
Well, we thought we'd give a go with this. So you might have seen demonstrations of this in the past. There are a number of sort of top tier or primary languages that CodeWhisperer supports.
TypeScript, JavaScript, Java,
Python,
C#, Python.
Very important from a data scientist point of view, yes. Yeah, so all of those languages that like the top languages you expect to be in there. So it's not officially supported here with SQL, but it still works with SQL. So
Okay.
you can actually
So
use it.
I hate SQL. So I'm not very good at SQL.
What's it ever done to you?
Oh, I'm just not very good at it. So I'd be really interested. Can CodeWhisperer help me?
Yeah.
Right, I don't know. A really simple. Let's start simple.
Yes, okay. Well, you can see here that we've already sort of started out with this. So what I've done here, so if you're not familiar with SQL syntax, and I'll be honest with you, this is a learning for me as of a moment ago. You helped me with this. So we've got the double dash syntax, which basically means this is a comment line.
One line comment.
Right, a one line comment. Right,
Yes,
okay. So maybe that was a bit the more efficient way of doing this, but it works. So we've got some comments at the top. So basically we've built into this a bit of a summary of some SQL tables that we've got. So we've got a product table, which has got an ID, a name, and price, and a category, and a quantity. Very normal kind of stuff.
And a sales table, and you define that ID, product ID, quantity, and
date. Yeah.
Right.
So
there's a relationship. So your product ID to product table.
That's correct. That's right. And so the thing here that we're doing is we're going to show how we can write a SQL query. So let's do that. I've actually got a comment line in here already. So this is now a SQL query. So to query the product table to count the number of products in each category.
Okay, so this is a prompt that you're going to pass into CodeWhisperer.
Yes, I mean that's what it is. But in our IDE, in our normal workflow, this is a comment.
Gotcha.
Right. So if I just press enter on that, you can see the CodeWhisperer icon sort of goes into its query mode there.
That is the thinking wheel of fun.
Thinking wheel of fun. And now it's come back with a suggestion. Okay, so it's got this italicized grey text here. And that's what it's suggesting for us.
Okay.
Now, it hasn't put that into the code, but it's waiting to see if we like it.
Okay.
Do you like it?
So select category count from product and group by category. So it's going to give me a count of the number of entries in the product table.
In this category. Yeah, which is what we wanted, which is great. So I can press the tab key and it'll sort of accept that if you like. You can also press left and right on more complex code and it will go through different options that you've got there as well.
Cool. Okay. So that's, that would save me as a developer, at least 30 seconds. What about...
It might save me a bit longer than that, but I appreciate it, yes.
What about something like, when I do SQL, I always struggle with joins. Something like a join. I always forget the syntax.
All right. So I've got a comment here that I can paste in. So this is SQL, so it's asking for a join to get the total sales amount for each product. So something a little bit more complicated?
Yep. Okay. That sounds pretty typical. Okay.
And so if I press enter on that, you can see again, CodeWhisperer cycles round. And we've got an option there. So we've got select pname sum s quantity.
So no join so far.
No join so far. What you notice as well is there's no semicolon at the end here. So it's doing a line at a time suggestion. So we could decide we don't like this, but we do like it. So I'll press tab and I'll press enter. And you'll notice the CodeWhisperer icon goes again. And here we've got our join. So I'll accept that. I'll press enter, see if it's got anything more for us. And then we've got our group by at the end there.
Cool.
Okay.
So that's selecting the name of the product, summing up the quantity of each product, and then joining it into sales. So it gets the number sold.
Cool. You like that?
Nice. Well, that would save me a couple of minutes probably as I worked out the join and worked out the relationship.
That's right. And so, it's the kind of thing you could go to Stack Overflow and copy and paste from, but it's right here in your actual IDE, so you don't have to break that flow. And again, we should mention that with languages such as Python, JavaScript, those kinds of languages, C#, the integration, or the knowledge, if you like, about those languages is even deeper, and you could expect it to write entire functions of code for you.
Nice. So that's pretty much, you talked about 2 categories. That's the tooling. What's the next level of category? So I want to know a bit more about LLMs, large language models, prompt engineering, and
you want to come over to the data science?
I don't want to come to that side. I'll stay in this side. Thanks very much. But where would I go to learn more? Say, for example, I didn't want to write SQL, but I still wanted to query a database, my database.
Okay, cool. Well, we can definitely look at integrating a large language model into your application that you're writing. So a large language model has that understanding of language. So it has a pretty good ability to be able to understand natural language that comes in and then help us to process that and do something with it. Okay. So I've got another demonstration I can show you here. So if I just switch over to my other screen.
Okay, what are we seeing now?
So here we're inside of SageMaker Studio. So this is Amazon SageMaker Studio. It's an environment for probably for data scientists to write often Python code and play around with machine learning. But what I can
Would a developer get in here? Would you see a developer coming in and going?
I absolutely think they should. Honestly, anybody who's not had to play around with notebooks, I just personally, please, I really think you should, because
he's pleading.
they transform the way I work with just little scripts and snippets of things, and as you're collaborating with other users. You don't have to use this though. It's just an easy way for me to be able to demonstrate the SDKs and stuff to be able to connect in with large language models.
So, and I could get started pretty easy.
Absolutely, yeah. You can spin up yourself a SageMaker Studio environment inside of the Amazon SageMaker console and start your journey here. You could also run this, by the way, in Visual Studio. Visual Studio supports notebooks as well, so you could run it in there as well.
Better.
Yeah. You like that? You like that?
That's better.
Okay.
Stay in the IDE, thanks. Okay, so what have we got?
So what we're going to look at here is how to connect together a large language model with something else. And so in this case, it's going to be with our data, so data that we have. One of the things with large language models is that you can prompt them and ask them to provide an answer to a question. And it will only be able to answer given the knowledge that it had at the point in time that it trained. So that could have been a year ago, it could have been 2 years ago, it could have been 6 months ago, and it won't know about anything from your current data store. You also might not want to give it, for example, information about your customers.
Not if I can help it.
So how do you query? This is a question we're going to answer. How do you query information about live data from something that it was never trained on?
So I'm building a new application. It's got some sort of data store, SQL data store. All the product information's in there, customer information, a lot of knowledge that this application has. It's obviously private to this application, but I still want to easily query it.
Using the power of generative AI.
Boom.
Yes, all right. So let's have a look at what we've got here. We're using, so it is Python, but we're bringing in and installing LangChain. So LangChain is an open source platform, which is a very, very active open source project. I think as of recording this, the last commit was just a couple of hours ago. And then before that, it was a few hours before that. So highly active.
Typical open source project.
So it's specifically designed to be able to link together your large language model and other things, including your own data. So we're going to have a look here at connecting it with a SQL database of sorts. It is a SQL-like database, so I'm sure that's not your favorite kind of database.
Well, it's a bit light on. But anyway, for the purpose
of this
demonstrations, and so we can point at screens and go, look.
Have a look. So I've just changed tabs here inside of the notebook, and all I'm doing that for is just to show you in very, very basic Python code, I've connected to this homemade recipes database, which is on this machine. And look, there's a whole bunch of data in
Number one, spaghetti carbonara.
Carbonara, yes.
Chef Luigi. Excellent.
I think you might have had that for dinner last night, actually.
Chef, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So we're going to use that database. So we're going to use LangChain for this. The first thing that we need to do is we need to give LangChain access to.
This is code.
Yes, it's code. This is code. You like this? You like this?
Well, it looks like Python.
Maybe CodeWhisperer write it for me. But yeah, this is Python code, which I've got. Basically, I'm connecting LangChain to the large language model. So you do need a large language model for this, and you can connect it to probably anyone that you can imagine. What I'm doing here is I'm connecting it to a model which is called Falcon. So it's Falcon 40B, so it's a 40 billion parameter model. And this model is currently running inside of my AWS account.
Okay. And you can just come across a Falcon 40B walking down the street. So how do you get access to?
I think they fly.
Yeah.
So this is actually as part of SageMaker Jumpstart. So Jumpstart helps you to really quickly be able to deploy large language models and other kinds of models actually into your environment really quickly.
Cool. Nice.
So you can browse Jumpstart, click the deploy button, and get a version of this up and running pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And Falcon 40B is one of the best open source large language models that's available right now. But things are moving fast all the time, so you'll be able to swap things in and out of there.
Soon it'll be more bees.
Yes, more bees. Yes.
More bees. Okay, so you're connecting. Cool. So you've got your LLM.
We set up some of the parameters that we've got there. So that's some of the things like temperature and things that you might be familiar with when playing around with large language models. And then we can connect it to the database.
Okay. Yep. Which is a fairly standard operation.
Yeah, so yeah, as you say, then this is like basically just your connection string. Yep. So this is obviously very simply connecting to something locally, but you could connect to an RDS database or SQL database.
If you have the connection string.
Whatever you've got. Beyond that then, we basically just have this one line of code here, which is creating what's called the chain. So this is the SQL database chain inside of LangChain. And this is basically where we're connecting together the large language model object with the database. Saying those two things exist, right, now go. And what happens in the background here is that LangChain basically does what's called prompt engineering for us. And so we can look at that in a little bit of detail in a second. Yeah. But it basically abstracts us away. We have. Yeah. So it abstracts us away from a lot of the complication of that kind of stuff, and it's built into the library itself. Okay. So this is it right here.
Okay, so you've got a question going, how many recipes are there? So
yeah.
It's querying that database.
So how many recipes are there? We're sending that into the chain that we've created, and this is what happens. So this is run just a moment ago outside the studio. We ran this, and
one we prepared earlier.
Well, exactly. Yes. And so it basically breaks it down into these steps. It inserts the question that we've got. It then will go and get a SQL query.
Okay, so I can see the SQL query, select count star from homemade recipe ratings, and that looks like valid SQL.
It absolutely, hope it is, yes. And then we got the results. So this structure here, as I understand it, that's sort of a SQL-like kind of structure. That's what you'd get when you bring back the results from that.
So it actually parses that result and gives you an answer.
Gives us the answer as that integer value of 30. So it's done all of that. Now look, that's a super simple SQL statement. I get it.
Telling me.
Yes. Yeah. You might be able to write that yourself, maybe.
Probably.
But the point here is that we've gone from natural language, how many recipes are there, to this SQL statement. So it's actually a translation problem, if you like. It's translated not between two different human languages, but between natural language and SQL, which I think is pretty exciting, if I'm honest.
That would have a lot of benefits.
Sure.
Yeah. So if I was writing, say, an application API for this database, I'd have to write each individual SQL statement, right?
Right. And then you'd have to have some way of sort of analyzing what the text is that comes in anyway.
Yeah. Even if I didn't.
What is it asking for?
I could have an update. I'd have an update. I have a create. That sort of.
Imagine I add please onto. Please can you tell me how many recipes are there? Like, and then you got to.
Would it answer you're welcome?
It probably might. We can try that later. We can try that later. we don't want to give it too much of a personality.
Okay, let's try something a bit more.
Well, just next down in the notebook here, just so that you know, I talked about prompt engineering before. Behind the scenes, this is actually the text which is getting sent to the large language model.
Okay, I love it says you are a SQLite expert.
Yep.
Full stop.
Yep. Yeah. Done.
No argument.
Yeah. And this is the kind of thing that makes me so excited. We're actually telling the large language model what we think of it. You are a SQLite expert. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to work with you. Yep. And look, here's a structure of how we're going to interact, which you'll notice is actually the template that was followed. And so this is nothing but text, and we're passing this into the model and saying, this is what we want you to do.
Nice.
I think it's very exciting. So we have some other examples here.
What have we got? How many recipes have a rating of 10?
10, yeah. So again, not earth-shatteringly complicated in terms of a SQL statement.
We've got a where statement. Yep.
But it writes it, and it calculates it, and it brings it back.
So if you think about this, you could potentially pop these SQL queries into standard out and log them.
Absolutely.
So if fault finding, debugging, what it's actually creating.
Yes, I think that would be a great idea. Because, I mean, imagine running this at scale, and if you want to be able to come back and actually figure out if there have been any problems. And look, I'll say as well, a lot of this stuff is sort of in its infancy. Like, it's only really been the last few months that people have played around with this at any type of scale. And so I think my suggestion, back to our initial question of what can you do as a developer, use the tools which are available, such as CodeWhisperer, and then start to experiment with these kinds of possibilities and learn the patterns, learn where they fail currently, learn where we need to do better, start to build on into that conversation. And yeah, I think this stuff is going to
great demos, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah,
no worries.
To the table.
Let's go back to the table. Yes.
So I hope everybody, found those demos as interesting as I did. Mike, so what advice would you give developers to get started? So, you've went through 2 demos, one of the tooling and then another one, how to actually build out and use LangChain to query a database. How would they get started?
Yeah, I think the thing to do is to keep an eye on what's happening in the industry. You don't have to spend all of your waking moments digging into generative AI, but there are a lot of exciting things happening, and I think there are some good opportunities out there. I think using things like CodeWhisperer and having it installed in your IDE and starting to work with it, there can sometimes be a little bit of learning around how to best work with it, right? Because you've probably been a developer for
some would say.
many times. And so you've probably got the ways that you work. And so introducing a new tool is always going to have some kind of little bit of friction as you kind of like figure out how it works for you, figure out what the workflow is going to look like. So have a play around with it, maybe on a pet project to start with, and just have a go with that. So I think that's definitely the thing. And then, have a go at integrating a large language model into your application stack and see what you can make it do. And realize that through things like LangChain, you can break out from the confines of just what the large language model can do. You can integrate it with other things. What we've looked at there with SQL, you could integrate it with an API. You could integrate it with another kind of document store. Anything that is sort of programmatically accessible, you can write an adapter and connect it in with your large language.
As long as you've got authorization to do so.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Goes without saying.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for sharing all of that about Gen AI and for developers. I hope you watching got as much out of it as I did. Thanks for everybody watching Gen AI for developers, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.